All right, so welcome everybody to distribution demo. Today we're going to demo a couple of things. I've got my GKE cluster and I've got a couple of issues to run down. One of them is a quick investigatory issue so everybody can see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. The second is going over an issue that we didn't prioritize enough, but we have now jumped and immediately fixed and released the patch 4 on the latest container sets. We'll probably confirm backport of that to previous versions very soon. And also one proposal from the community to have a JSON structured logging format from all of our containers through essentially a xtail-like wrapper program. So I have a deployment here, or a cluster here, with nothing in it. The first one I'm going to do is look at this item from the docs feedback. So this came from a customer. They said they were trying to install with the license and they were following the installation guide. They said they set the settings and they tried to use the name to be whatever they wanted. I have a feeling they may have tried to use verbatim. When they did this, they ended up having to name the secret GitLab-GitLab-license, and then it started to work. Their concern was that either the setting wasn't actually doing anything, either no effect or ignored, or B, it's required, but it always has to have a static value. That would be something that would be odd, because I was fairly certain we specifically tested that pattern, but all the same, we'll just go ahead and confirm that. So I did a quick investigation just to confirm where the license actually gets consumed. The only mention of this setting, by the way, is in the greater installation guide. It's not documented anywhere else, partially because the migrations chart isn't actually documented. So the job template itself actually directly consumes this secret, doing so by name. So when you set global GitLab license secret, you're actually telling it the specific Kubernetes secret name that it's supposed to be using for the mount. If this person was actually somehow using a invalid secret name, we would have seen it like barf everywhere about the YAML being bad. So I don't know exactly the scenario that this person ran into. By default, the setting is also paired with the license secret key, but that is set to license when not provided. Now, our documentation on creating that does actually say that you're expected to do from file equals license equals file path. And what that does is specifically create that specific key with that specific content. If you were to skip the equals license equals and just go with equals file path, you may actually end up with a different key content. So I've followed our documentation, and then I'm going to pass in the configuration that actually contains that secret, just the name. And then I'm going to make sure that it does or does not work. So I have my secret here, and I've used a custom name in this particular case. And you can say that it has the key of license. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to install 4.2.1 in particular. It's a released version, but now I don't have to reinstall twice to go on to the next item. So I'm installing 4.2.1. I have my base configuration. I'm including the thing for the next issue we're going to review. And then I've got a configuration file for my license itself, which is basically global GitLab license secret that matches to the name I have over here. Go ahead and let that run up. I'm actually going to watch the pods. The reason I'm watching the pods in this case is the job for migrations, if it's going to fail weird, because we're specifying it or it doesn't get defined with that, I can see the pod and see whether or not it actually has the mount definition. And yes, this is a full from scratch deploy. So we watch all the pretty colors that come from K9S. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump over here and do a description on this. And it's definitely mounting my license by the right name, or attempting to mount the secret by the right name. It's mounting it to where we would expect this to end up going. Since this is a disposable environment, I'm not worried about whatever the content is here. But it should eventually say, oh, yeah, we preloaded your license. There we go. License added. Take a little bit for everything to finish coming up. Starting to get the web service into a happy state, so we should start getting responses soon. As soon as they pass their full readiness checks, Nginx should start passing traffic. Of course, I'm getting error name not resolved, so, you know, there's always that. Dear Chrome. Name not resolved. By the way, when I try to resolve it, it works just fine from the command line. So, classic DNS fun. Yeah, I didn't typo it.
Yeah, that name resolves for me as well.
I see the login page.
And like I said, it runs perfectly fine from my command line. Just absolutely classic. Let's try an incognito tab. Nope. Interesting. Curl says the same thing, but dig works. Okay. When in doubt, smash my DNS server in the head and it works fine. Caching. Okay, so now we're in, and we know the license did actually install. So we have a license, and it is indeed functionally active. So it looks like the documentation works as described, unless this particular person ran into an issue where they didn't create the secret with the key name being license, and thus need to actually specify key. But it doesn't quite line up to what they've said, where as soon as they renamed it to GitLab license, it worked fine. So I'm going to say feedback on this is actually maybe we should not be doing this whole name bit in the brackets that don't work, or we should make it clearer how to properly define this secret somehow. But we've confirmed that this is not actually a problem. Okay, so let's go to the next one I have on the agenda for the day, which is the backup and restore of Git LFS objects. For this, I'm going to pop my way into the task runner, and I'm going to go home directory for the sake of it, and do backup utility skip. They're talking about LFS, but it actually happens on all buckets. I'm just going to skip several items so that we don't have to wait as long for the commands to complete. Right, I almost forgot about this one. For some reason, we don't necessarily create a backup path. So if you don't actually have it back up the repositories, the path it tries to write a tar file into doesn't work. Magic. Oh, I forgot about packages. Okay, so we know that this is a thing. So what I'm going to do is, there's pretty much nothing in here. I'm going to do util cp dot, and we're going to look at contents of that. You can see we have lfs.tar.gz. Inside of that is the LFS structure. I have a shared bucket, by the way. That's why I didn't want to make 5 copies. So this should be 4F83, etc. So if I do a restore of that bucket, then the contents of this bucket should actually have the exact same content, correct? However, if I do this, and I tell it to restore that, what it will end up doing is actually cutting off the first directory of everything as it does the restoration. The backups are valid. The restoration actually fails. So if I do a ls on the bucket, oh, there's a dash in the name. Of course. You'll notice 4F is now gone. So while the issue is reported that LFS is broken, and this is what I'm showing you as a test, as it turned out, every restore was actually broken. This was filed some time ago, back in May, and we did not specifically test all the way down to the root of it. We actually asked that another team take it up. After seeing multiple folks come along and say, I'm seeing this too, I went ahead and jumped it to find out what was going on. My investigation can be found inside of the issue. Essentially, the actual change was very, very tiny. Once we found out the root of the specific cause, it was literally because we didn't have the path at the end. So when gsutil rsync works, it behaves pretty much identically to rsync itself. As long as you have a single item, you won't run into an issue. But when it's a directory, it will take the contents under that directory and place it into the destination if that too is a directory. So we actually have to tell it the dir name that it should put the content into because of the nature of how we're making this call to upload to object storage. We actually upload directories at a time instead of the entire directory in one full sync. And that has to do with some behaviors between S3 and gsutil. The short answer is we add the trailing directory, and everything works perfectly now. We have gone ahead and put that into the CNG. It's in 13.3 already. It's been backported to 13.2, and we'll backport that farther here very soon. I can show that it works in the 4.2.2 release if anybody'd like. I can tell you it does because it's literally just that difference. And if I were to edit the file to show you the same exact patch, you would see that the restoration works perfectly fine. I'm not seeing any nods of yes, so
I'm
going to go ahead
convinced.
to
Why
the
don't
next
we?
item.
Yeah, that sounds good. We're getting low on time.
Yeah. So on to the next one here is a user proposal to actually replace our logging patterns. This has been open for a little while. We've discussed things. They actually created a small Go program that does this work over in GitLab loggers, what they're calling it, and they have it done up as a Go binary. It's just under 1.9 megs. I'm actually going to just go ahead and copy this link address, and essentially what this does is takes all the log files that are in the given container and then actually wraps them in JSON output, saying which log file it came from, the component from which it came, and then the content of whatever that line output actually is. While this is not perfect, especially when it comes to production.log and the actual full trace outputs that it contains. It's a start and actually gives us a structured log content for each container throughout the project. I say this in such a way because for those in which we're using xtail, primarily Sidekick and web service at this time, you get this giant flood of all of their content. Some of them are structured, some of them are not, and it's essentially unparsable by some of the upstream consumers of those. Even our own production has a couple of issues once in a while in dealing with that. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into one of these containers, jump into the web service, so the Rails web server itself. And I'm going to download the file. And it essentially is just like a tail replacement. The call to it is not very complex at all. Where are we at? I know I had the exact syntax in use yesterday. Essentially, you tell it what you want to exclude, and the min level that you actually want. So I'm going to not bother with setting any of the other defaults, and I'm literally just going to tell it the path to the files. And you can see that we actually get full JSON wrapped output. The reason this one in particular matters is, as is mentioned by our delivery and infrastructure teams, the fact that we can't easily delineate content of production.log from application.log from everything else. There's a number of things that are put in place to effectively monkey patch the output so it can actually be consumed by Fluent or GCP's structured logging system that I can't remember the name of it right now. My apologies. The proposal from the user was to actually make this a sidecar. So you run this as another container, share the logs via an empty dir, and then have it read all of the logs. And then you only have to follow the logs for that specific container. What I'm saying is this is such a small and effectively self-contained drop-in replacement for tail or xtail. We can do this. This is a stopgap methodology towards structured logging that helps both our consumers as well as our own infrastructure, as well as allows us to put the exact same functionality inside of the UBI, because that's one thing we don't actually quite have in the UBI is because xtail is not natively present within the repositories there. This is a self-contained Go program. We're already doing all of that work now to compile some of our own Go programs. So it may make sense to do this, but I wanted to show what this effectively does. For comparison, this is the output from the pods. This is the output from this JSON converter. While this is more legible when you're watching it with your eyes, it's not a consumable because you get one log here, another log somewhere else, and you have to figure out where the interleave actually works, and then you have to recombine it into solid content or pop into the pod, pull the file out, and read it as it was originally written. Anyone have question or comment or opinion to make on content shift? I see no and hear none, so the monkeys have spoken of nope. So I will go ahead and call this a completed demo for this cycle. I have all of the issues in the agenda from today. For those that are specifically interested, here is GitLab charts issue 2098, which is the proposal to replace the state-of-the-art logging. Here is GitLab charts issue 2072, which is the broken GSUtil restore. And here is charts issue 2231, which is seeking confirmation on the patterns for installing a license. So thanks everybody for coming, and have a good weekend.
Thanks, Jason.